The sound of a news broadcast echoes across the city of Los Angeles. A place once known for its lights, dreams, and vibrant life has now turned into a city filled with violence. Crime happens almost every day, and the police are struggling to keep up. In the middle of this chaos, we are introduced to a man named Paul Kersey. On the surface, he appears calm and composed, working as an architect. But beneath that quiet exterior lies a deep wound that has never truly healed. Some time ago, his life was shattered by tragedy. His wife was killed in a brutal crime. His daughter, Carol, survived, but the trauma left her completely withdrawn. Since that day, she has not spoken a single word, living in a silent world of her own. Even so, Paul tries to move forward. He now lives in Los Angeles and is in a relationship with a caring reporter named Jerry Nichols. She stands by him through his darkest moments. Together, they regularly visit Carol, who is being treated in a psychiatric hospital. There has been no improvement, but they continue to hope that one day she will return to who she used to be. One afternoon, Paul, Jerry, and Carol go out into the city. They are trying to help Carol reconnect with the outside world. They walk through parks, busy sidewalks, and eventually reach the pier. Everything feels calm on the surface, but Paul remains alert. He knows the world around him is far from safe. While Gary and Carol spend time together, Paul steps away to buy ice cream. Without realizing it, he has already been targeted by a group of street thugs. They watch him from a distance, seeing him as an easy victim.
Out the way. Out the way. Watch out,
Jerk,
asshole.
Go get your ice cream.
Pretending it is an accident, they bump into him and quickly steal his wallet. As soon as Paul notices, he chases them into a narrow alley. He manages to corner one of them. A young man named Jiver. The man pulls out a knife and tries to threaten him, but Paul stays calm. He disarms him quickly and fights him off. Still, his wallet is gone. Instead of pushing further, Paul chooses to walk away and lets him go. He returns to Gary and Carol as if nothing happened, casually saying he may have lost his wallet. They continue their day and enjoy the peaceful view by the sea. But that calm does not last long. Gary has to leave for work, and Paul heads home with Carol. Elsewhere, the situation begins to escalate. The criminals discover Paul's home address from the stolen wallet. They drive there in a van, carrying out a plan that is already set in motion. At the house, the housekeeper Rosario is preparing dinner. One of the men pretends to be a delivery person and rings the doorbell.
Have you told Janet? You said you were going to tell her last
Who is it?
I got a delivery from Mr. Kersey.
Rosario starts to feel uneasy. Before she can react, the back door is suddenly forced open. The group storms inside. They drag Rosario and silence her. One of them commits a cruel act while the others laugh. The house, once peaceful, instantly becomes a place of violence and terror. Not long after, Paul and Carol arrive home, unaware of what has happened. The moment they step inside, they are attacked. Paul is beaten until he loses consciousness. Rosario, who tries to seek help, is killed on the spot, and Carol is taken away by the attackers. This is Death Wish 2. Inside a car speeding through the night, the attackers begin to panic. They worry that Carol might recognize their faces. Jiver reminds them that Paul has also seen them before, but their leader, Cutter, brushes it off as unimportant. When they arrive at their hideout, the situation only gets worse. Carol remains silent and unresponsive, completely paralyzed by the trauma she has endured. Meanwhile, Paul regains consciousness. Not long after, Gary arrives at the house and is met with a horrifying scene. Rosario is already dead, and Carol is nowhere to be found. Around that same time, Carol attempts to escape. She manages to break free and jumps from the second floor, but her escape ends in tragedy when she falls and is fatally injured on the iron fence below. Her body now lies in the morgue, waiting to be identified. The sight forces Paul to face the harshest reality of his life. With heavy steps, he has no choice but to accept that there is nothing left. Everyone he loved is gone. Sometime later, Carol is laid to rest in a quiet and somber funeral. Paul stands there in silence, watching as his daughter is lowered into the ground. His supervisor suggests that he take time off from work, but Paul refuses. He chooses to carry on as usual, even though he has not truly recovered. Eventually, he retreats to a remote cabin in the woods. There, he releases his emotions by chopping firewood endlessly, as if each swing of the axe helps him control the anger burning inside him. Weeks pass, and Paul returns to the city, trying to resume his normal life. He goes back to work as an architect and takes part in a new construction project. He even attends a meeting with the owner of the radio station where Gary works, doing his best to appear normal in front of others. After the meeting, Gary tries to spend some time with him, hoping to reconnect. But Paul gently turns her down. He is not ready, still trapped in a grief that has not yet healed. Outside the building, a few police officers approach Paul and show him photos of known criminals, hoping he can identify the men who attacked him. But Paul claims he remembers nothing. What they do not realize is that he has already begun moving in silence. When he gets home, he retrieves a gun he has kept hidden and carefully loads it, one bullet at a time. That night, Paul steps into the streets with a new sense of purpose. He moves cautiously, watching every corner and every suspicious face. Dressed in dark clothing to avoid attention, he blends into the city. He even rents a room in a rundown motel under a false name, using it as a hideout. But that night, he finds no one. The next morning, Gary suddenly shows up at his house without warning. Paul quickly hides the weapon and acts normal. After she leaves, he immediately changes all the locks. From that moment on, he lives in constant alert. The following night, Paul returns to the streets. This time, he spots one of the men who robbed him, a thug named Stomper. Without hesitation, he follows him into an abandoned building. Moving quietly with his gun ready, Paul takes control of the situation. He incapacitates one of the men and drives the others away, forcing Stomper to stay behind.
You and you out, not you.
When Paul notices a cross necklace around the man's neck, he becomes certain this is one of the people who destroyed his life. Without giving him any chance, Paul pulls the trigger. Afterward, he returns to the motel to hide the weapon, then heads back home as if nothing happened. Not long after, Gary calls him, wondering why he has been so hard to reach. Paul gives a simple excuse to avoid suspicion. They even make plans to meet on Friday. Meanwhile, news of Stomper's death begins to spread. The next night, Paul goes out again. In an underground parking area, he hears a scream. He rushes over and finds a woman about to be abducted and assaulted. Without hesitation, he intervenes. 2 attackers are shot, while a third manages to escape, dragging the woman with him. By coincidence, Paul realizes that this man is Jiver. Without wasting a second, Paul shoots and wounds him, then follows the trail of blood. The chase leads into another empty building. There, Jiver tries to fight back using a forklift, but Paul manages to avoid the attack and ends it with a final shot. He leaves the scene before the police arrive. At the same time, Inspector Mankiewicz begins to suspect that something is wrong. He is frustrated because the woman Paul saved refuses to cooperate. Despite his efforts, he gets no answers. The case slowly points to one conclusion: someone is taking justice into their own hands. Mankiewicz discusses this with his superiors. They recall a similar case from New York, and that is when Paul's name comes up again. A detective from New York named Ochoa has long suspected him. He believes Paul is the same man behind those past incidents. Because of that, Ochoa is sent to Los Angeles to stop him. After arriving, Ochoa learns about the tragedy that destroyed Paul's family. He meets Gary and explains Paul's past, how he once hunted criminals on his own. He urges her to stop Paul before it is too late. Soon after, Gary tries to talk to Paul, but he continues to deny everything, speaking calmly and convincingly until she begins to doubt her own suspicions. Meanwhile, Ochoa starts watching Paul closely. He parks a car outside Paul's house and keeps his distance. Sensing something is off, Paul leaves through the back door, unaware that he is being followed. The trail eventually leads Ochoa to the motel where Paul has been hiding. That night, Paul returns to the streets once again, this time carrying 2 guns. In a park, he spots 3 men he instantly recognizes, Cutter and his crew. Without hesitation, he follows them onto a bus, while Ochoa keeps watch from a distance. Inside the bus, the men begin harassing a woman. Paul stays quiet, waiting for the right moment. After they get off, he continues to follow them into a more isolated area. It turns out they are in the middle of a weapons deal. Paul moves in slowly, preparing to strike. But from afar, Ochoa notices something dangerous. A sniper is already aiming at Paul. He reacts immediately, taking the shot and neutralizing the threat. At the same time, the situation erupts into chaos. Ochoa is hit and goes down, while Paul opens fire, killing Cutter and 2 others. One man tries to escape, but Paul chases him down until the man falls to his death. Paul then rushes back to Ochoa, who is barely alive. In his final moments, Ochoa wants everything to end. Not long after, he dies. Before everything is over, one of the criminals manages to reveal a name: Charles Wilson. The next day, Paul goes to the radio station where Gary works. There he learns that the police are planning a raid on Charles's hideout. One of Gary's colleagues gives him a police scanner. Using it, Paul tracks their movements and prepares to act on his own. As the police move into position, Paul follows them. He sees Charles enter an old building. Without hesitation, Paul climbs up and slips inside from above. Inside, he finally finds Charles, heavily intoxicated. A brief struggle breaks out. Charles manages to injure Paul's hand and tries to escape, but the police have already surrounded the place. The situation turns chaotic, and Charles is eventually overwhelmed and captured. Afterward, Paul returns to the motel and treats his wound on his own. At the same time, Gary arrives and discovers his fake identity as a doctor. She also learns that Charles is dead. Without saying a word, she takes off her engagement ring and walks away, leaving Paul behind. Months pass. Paul is later seen attending a presentation for a new building design. He appears calm, almost detached. When invited to a celebration, he gives a simple response and moves on. In the end, he walks alone through the night in Los Angeles, continuing his path as a vigilante, delivering justice in his own way. So the moral of the story is, if someone steals your wallet, maybe cancel your cards first before turning into a full-time night shift superhero with anger issues.